Ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, I'm honored to welcome you on behalf of the mission of Israel to the EU and NATO, the American Jewish Committee Transatlantic Institute, and the European Office of the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung to this Holocaust Remembrance Day ceremony. We are grateful to see so many of you here with us to mark this important day and to commemorate the millions of victims of the Shoah. In 2005, the United Nations General Assembly designated January 27th the anniversary of the liberation of the Nazi concentration camp of Auschwitz-Birkenau as International Holocaust Memorial Day. And today, we mark the 77th anniversary of its liberation. Now, as time passes, there are unfortunately less and less Holocaust survivors to share their stories. More than ever, it is up to us to keep their memory alive and to ensure the transmission of this collective memory to the future generations. That is why, in the second part of today's events, we will listen to a discussion on the duty to remember and to commemorate the victims of the Holocaust. It will be our honor to host Mrs. Regina Suchowolski-Sluszny, who will share with us her personal story. Then she will be joined by the European Commission's coordinator on combating antisemitism and fostering Jewish life, Mrs. Katharina von Schnurbein, for a panel discussion moderated by Mr. Barnabas Turai, the American Jewish Committee's representative in Hungary. Now, I'm honored to invite His Excellency Ambassador Chaim Regev, Ambassador of the State of Israel to the EU and NATO, to open this ceremony. The floor is yours, Your Excellency.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today we mark the International Holocaust Remembrance Day. 77 years after the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau, I am proud to speak here today as the representative of the Jewish state, the State of Israel. I would like to thank our partner, the American Jewish Committee, Transatlantic Institute, and Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung, as well as the Vice President of the European Commission, Margaritis, Schinas, for honoring us with his presence. Ladies and gentlemen, in the past 2 years, the COVID-19 crisis has highlighted the growing and concerning trend of Holocaust trivialization, also known as Holocaust banalization. We are facing this trend when protesters comparing pandemic measures taken by governments to the policies of segregation of Jews during the Second World War. Holocaust trivialization is no less dangerous than Holocaust denials, since it diminishes the magnitude of this tragic event in human history. Holocaust trivialization flourishes in a gray zone and is mainly the product of indifference and ignorance. And that is the reason why education is of such importance when we talk about Holocaust remembrance. As the generation that survived the Holocaust is almost gone, it is up to us to share the stories and legacies with the next generations. We honor to have with us Ms. Regina Suchowolski-Sluszny, who survived the Holocaust, here with us today to share her testimony. Regina is a source of pride and inspiration for all of us. In this spirit, I would like to congratulate and thank the European Commission for adoption of the first ever EU strategy on combating anti-Semitism and fostering Jewish life, which gives a central place to education. The ambitious strategy is of a key importance to help prevent all forms of anti-Semitism, both offline and online, secure Jewish life in Europe, and educating the next generations about the Holocaust. On this occasion, I would like to express my gratitude to the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, to the Commission's Vice President for promoting the European way of life, Margaritis, Schinas, and to the Commission's coordinator on combating anti-Semitism and fostering Jewish life, Katharina von Schnurbein, who is with us today. Thank you for the hard work you have put into this strategy and for your unwavering commitment in the fight against anti-Semitism. On this occasion, I would like to welcome the approval of the resolution co-sponsored by Israel and Germany on combating Holocaust denial by the UN General Assembly last week. Holocaust remembrance and education is not only important in Europe, where most of Nazi crimes were executed, but also throughout the entire world. The lesson of the Holocaust must be universal. Holocaust awareness is especially important in our common neighborhood, the Middle East. For decades, Holocaust denial and distortion have been promoted and even sometimes state-sponsored. However, since the signing of the Abraham Accord and the beginning of the normalization process with our moderate Arab neighbors, we have witnessed the wind of change. I had the privilege to take part at the visit of then Foreign Minister Gabi Ashkenazi with his UAE counterpart, Sheikh Abdallah Ben Zayed, to the Holocaust Memorial in Berlin in October 2020. Their joint signature in the memorial visitors book, Never Again, symbolized the beginning of a new era of peace and harmony in the region, based on mutual respect and understanding. To share a common future, we need to understand each other's past. Ladies and gentlemen, it is through remembrance that we will make sure that autocracies that happened here in Europe 80 years ago will never happen again. It is throughout education that the memory of the Holocaust and those who were murdered will live on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for your important message and for your inspiring words. Now our next speaker is Mr. Daniel Schwamenthal, Director of the American Jewish Committee Transatlantic Institute. Please, Mr. Schwamenthal.
Dear Vice President Schinas, Ambassador Regev, Dr. Ostry, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to participate with you at this ceremony for the victims of the Shoah. I was not supposed to be with you here today. As a matter of fact, I wasn't supposed to be at all. That's because my parents weren't supposed to have survived the plans Nazi Germany and her collaborators had devised for them and the rest of my people. My mother was just 4 years old when German soldiers locked her in a ghetto designated for extermination, and my father, barely in his teens, was supposed to find his death in a slave labor camp. I wish we could today commemorate the 6 million murdered Jews in the secure knowledge that living Jews are finally safe and respected in Europe. Alas, within living memory of the Shoah, the remnants of Europe's Jewish communities are facing a bloody resurgence of anti-Semitism. Radical Islamists have murdered Jews across the continent, which is why protecting the basic security of Jewish institutions remains such a priority. The very word Jew has become an insult in European classrooms. Jewish rituals and traditions are being attacked by European legislators and courts. Anti-Semitism is an affront not just to Jews, but to our common humanity, and thus often a symptom of a larger disease in society. This is why the enemies of our liberal democracy, be they from the far right, the far left, or radical Islam, are also always the enemies of Jews and the Jewish state. Israel is thus central to this conversation. One cannot understand the lessons of the Shoah without understanding the link between Jews and Israel. Imagine if Israel had come into being only a few years earlier, how many lives would have been saved? What then to make of the obsession of certain activists and so-called NGOs with the one tiny speck in the vast Middle East committed to giving Jews a safe refuge in their ancestral homeland? I am therefore grateful that the EU has reaffirmed its commitment to the IRA working definition, which explicitly includes as examples of anti-Semitism, the demonization of Israel, as well as holding Jews responsible for Israel's actions, both real and all too often imagined or distorted. What's more, member states have pledged to mainstream the fight against anti-Semitism across policy areas and the Commission presented last year its first ever European strategy on combating anti-Semitism. Allow me, therefore, to underline three important issues. First, no policy area is, of course, more relevant than education. This is why we need a review of school books to ensure that young Europeans study, yes, the Holocaust, but also learn about broader Jewish history and Judaism, which is, after all, one of the foundation stones of Western civilization. Unless young Europeans learn about the Jews' ancient and enduring link to the land of Israel and receive a factual and balanced account of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, many of the old and new misperceptions will persist. Second, if Europe wants to mainstream the fight against anti-Semitism, it can no longer dismiss extremist indoctrination abroad as the domestic affairs of foreign countries beyond the reach of its diplomacy, particularly if these countries receive generous EU aid. Fighting anti-Semitism also abroad must become a central plank of our foreign policy in Europe. And third, the UN, built on the ashes of the Holocaust, all too often treats Israel like the Jew among the nations. The EU must thus make it a priority to finally end this discrimination against the world's only Jewish state, because the double standards against Israel also violate the UN's very own values and distract from other, far more urgent issues. As a result, multilateralism itself is harmed. Let's therefore hope that when we commemorate the 6 billion murdered Jews next year, Europe will have again become a much safer and welcoming place for her Jews. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schaumenthal, for your strong words and your very important message. And now I would like to invite our third distinguished guest, Dr. Hardy Ostry, Head of the European Office of the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung. Dr. Ostry, the floor is yours.
Your Excellency, Ambassador Regev, Daniel Schaumenthal, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the European Office of the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung, I would like to extend a warm welcome to our today's ceremony on today's International Holocaust Remembrance Day, to commemorate the Shoah and the 6 million Jews who fell victim to the atrocities of the Nazi regime. A week ago, the German television channel ZDF broadcasted the film Die Wannsee-Konferenz on the occasion of the 80th anniversary of the Wannsee Conference held in Berlin. On the basis of the protocol of the meeting drawn by Eichmann, the film describes the meeting of the leading representatives of the Nazi regime on 20th of January 1942 in a villa in Berlin-Wannsee, where the so-called final solution of the Jewish question was discussed. The film showed once again the banality of evil, as Hannah Arendt quoted it once, in a shockingly cold, brutal, technical way in which the murder of millions of Jews was planned. The more cruel and more inhuman the atrocities, the more crucial it is to never forget about them, not only in memory of those who were harshly despised, excluded from society, tortured and killed in outrageous ways under the Nazis. By remembering what unfolded during the rule of the Nazis in the Third Reich, exclusion, persecution, and killing, we become aware of the enormous relevance of a democratic world order where human rights, the rule of law, and the separation of powers should be a matter to ensure the security, the acceptance, and the well-being of all people. Therein resides the huge added value of a collective culture of remembrance. Nevertheless, and the ambassador mentioned it already, the collective awareness of the cruelties seems to decrease. We can observe also in Germany, unfortunately, a flare-up of hatred, racism, and anti-Semitism, as well as the rise of far-right and populist political parties in numerous European countries. And therefore, it remains extremely important, and it is, as Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung, our DNA to oppose those dangerous social phenomena and to promote a peaceful and respectful cohabitation for all people, and especially for Jews in Germany, and to underline the importance of civic education. For the next hour, we would like to solemnly remember the victims of the Shoah. And for this, I would like to thank Vice President Schinas for enriching our ceremony with his speech. I would like to thank Katharina von Schnurbein for joining our panel, as well as Regina Suchowolski-Sluszny, who is a survivor of the Shoah. Many thanks also to the Embassy of the State of Israel, to the UN NATO Ambassador Regev and Daniel Schwammenthal from the American Jewish Committee. I hope really that next year we might be able to gather once again in real and to share all our experiences and to give a worth remembrance to all of those victims of the Nazi regime. Now I wish all of us a solemn ceremony. With your participation, dear participants, you contribute to keeping the common culture of remembrance, not only with regard to the past, but especially with regard to the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ostry. And thank you very much again to our speakers for their strong words and their important message, which you must all bear in mind. This year, in cooperation with the project Shem Vener, known in English as Our 6 Million, a candle for every name, each of our distinguished speakers will light a personal memorial candle in memory of one of the 6 million Jews who perished during the Holocaust. Our speakers will honor today the memories of Gertrud Kuttner, Norbert Blasberg, and Leitzer Friedman. Ambassador Regev will light the first candle to honor the memory of Gertrud Kuttner. Gertrud was born in Katowice in Poland in 1884 to Jacob and Jenny Lowy. She married Waldemar Kuttner and they lived in Durlach, Germany. Gertrud was murdered in Auschwitz in 1942 at the age of 68. Her son survived. Mr. Daniel Schwammenthal will light a candle in the memory of Leitzer Friedman. Leitzer was born in Warsaw in 1970 to Yakov and Frimet. He was a merchant. Leitzer was murdered in Auschwitz in 1942 at the age of 25. Only his sister survived. Dr. Ostry will honor the memory of Norbert Blasberg. Norbert was born in Lwów, Poland in 1907. He was a lawyer and he was married to Gina, née Lieberman. Norbert was murdered in January 1943 at the age of 36 in the Belgian extermination camp in Poland. Now our three speakers may light the memorial candles. Thank you. And I would now like to invite you all to hold a short moment of silence. May their memories be a blessing. Now it is my honor to introduce the keynote speaker for this event, Vice President of the European Commission and Commissioner for Promoting the European Way of Life, Mr. Margaritis Schinas. We will now listen to a pre-recorded message from the Vice President.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, it is an honor to join you today on the International Holocaust Remembrance Day for this solemn commemoration ceremony. Even if the pandemic forces us once again to meet through screens, it is my sincere hope that we will be able to meet in person and celebrate this important occasion soon. I commend the consistent efforts by the mission of Israel to the EU and NATO, the American Jewish Committee Transatlantic Institute, and the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung to preserve the memory of the victims of the Holocaust, including through this annual event. Today, we mark the 77th anniversary of the liberation of the Nazi concentration camp Auschwitz-Birkenau, a place that has become a defining symbol of the Holocaust, a reminder and a warning of the terrors to which hate and anti-Semitism can lead if left unchallenged. This year also marks the 80th anniversary of the 1C conference, a 90-minute meeting on the 20th of January 1942, where 15 men, senior government officials, SS leaders, and representatives of the Nazi Party tragically sealed the fate of European Jews. In the words of Elie Wiesel, not every victim was a Jew, but every Jew was a victim. Anti-Semitism, unfortunately, did not end with the Shoah. Today, it is once again worryingly on the rise, both in Europe and beyond. In its contemporary manifestations, it may take the form of Israel-related anti-Semitism or hide behind anti-Zionism, which is the most common form of anti-Semitism encountered online by Jews in Europe today. Manifestations of Holocaust denial, distortion, and trivialization have also seen a sharp increase recently, both online and in our streets in Europe. We are witnessing attempts to rewrite European and Jewish history, and blatant disinformation seeking to rekindle centuries-old prejudice against Jews by exploiting the extraordinary context of the pandemic. We must call this out for what it is, a grave threat to our democracies. And our democracies should not be taken for granted. Protecting them against the poison of anti-Semitism, populism, and extremism is our collective duty as Europeans. And in this sense, remembering the Holocaust is not only a name in itself. It is also necessary to ensure that Europe will never go down the same dark road it did in the past. After the Second World War, people returning from the camps, prisons, battlefields, or exile, they tried to build a solid democracy in Germany. For Konrad-Adenauer himself, this included reconciliation with the Jewish people and the newly founded State of Israel. Adenauer's statements in the Bundestag in 1951, the Eichmann trial in Jerusalem, and the Auschwitz trial in Frankfurt, intergenerational debates within its family, and a constant public debate on the historic and societal factors that led to the Shoah, served as the basis for fostering a culture of remembrance. The way to a culture of remembrance as we see it in Germany today was thorny, but it was at the same time instrumental in acknowledging and establishing the uniqueness of the Shoah as a genocide of unprecedented scale, planned and executed by the Nazis and their collaborators. The European Union was built on the ashes of the Shoah. The Holocaust is a defining legacy of our European history. It is a legacy we must shield from distortion in a rapidly changing environment. The last Holocaust survivors are passing away. Information spreads in the digital sphere at an unprecedented speed, and Europe is becoming more multi-ethnic and diverse, with many young Europeans have no direct family link with the Holocaust. I believe it is now time to establish a true European culture of remembrance, and we are determined to do so together with our member states. 1 year ago, as I joined you virtually to light a candle in the memory of the millions of Jewish women, men and children murdered during the Holocaust, I also made a promise that the European Commission would step up its efforts to ensure that history is not forgotten and that such atrocities never happen again. And we lived up to this promise with the first ever EU strategy on combating anti-Semitism and fostering Jewish life, which I had the honor to present from the European Parliament in Strasbourg last October. This European strategy is our commitment to a future free from anti-Semitism, where Jewish life is allowed to fully flourish as part of a united and diverse Europe. The European Union also wishes to lead the global fight against anti-Semitism, joining forces with our like-minded international partners. We see important steps being taken, such as the United Nations resolution on Holocaust denial, co-facilitated by Israel and Germany, adopted with the full support of the EU and all our member states. Israel is a key partner for the European Union, including in the global fight against anti-Semitism. And I'm deeply grateful for the warm words of President Herzog and the Israeli government on the adoption of the EU strategy, and look forward to strengthening our cooperation as we now are turning it into action. We also wish to further reinforce the long-standing strong transatlantic ties in fighting the scourge of anti-Semitism and Holocaust distortion, including as partners in the European Holocaust Remembrance infrastructure. Our strategy includes a number of specific targeted initiatives on Holocaust remembrance, education, and research. And we will support the creation of a network of places where the Holocaust happened, such as hiding places, deportation points, and Jewish cultural sites all over the European continent. We are also making significant funding available through the Remembrance strand of the Citizens' Equality, Rights and Values program, which has a total budget of 8 million euros for this year. And research efforts on all aspects of anti-Semitism and Jewish life in Europe have to be increased to complement Holocaust research. We shall therefore set up, in cooperation with our member states, a European research hub on contemporary anti-Semitism and Jewish life. We will also create a network of young Europeans, of young ambassadors, ensuring Holocaust remembrance, and continue our awareness-raising campaign on countering distortion and protecting the facts. Dear friends, as part of today's ceremony, I'm grateful for the chance to honor a victim, a relative, a hero, in accordance with the Jewish tradition of lighting a personal memorial candle. I will always remember what David Harris told me when I took up my duties. He said, "Europe was hell for our parents and grandparents. We should make it a safer place for our children, a place that they are happy to identify with." My promise to you today is that indeed we will.
Thank you very much, Vice President, for your important message. Now, the Vice President also lit a memorial candle for Hanna Kartecki. Hanna was born in Lodz, Poland, in 1924 to Pinchas and Perl. She was murdered in Auschwitz in 1942 at the age of 18. Thank you very much, Vice President. Ladies and gentlemen, it is our duty to keep the memories of the victims of the Holocaust alive. And it is our duty to pass their stories to the younger generations. That is why we will now listen to the testimony of Mrs. Regina Suchowolski-Sluszny. Then we will welcome Mrs. Katharina von Schnurbein, European Commission's coordinator on combating anti-Semitism and fostering Jewish life, for a conversation on the importance to remember and to commemorate the Holocaust. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you are all more than welcome to write your questions in the Q&A function on Zoom, and we will present these questions to Mrs. Suchowolski-Sluszny after her testimony. So please do not hesitate to use this Q&A function if you have any questions you wish to ask. Now, dear Regina, we are very glad that you are here with us today, and we're honored to be able to listen to your story. So I will now give you the floor to tell your story.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to tell my story, what I passed in the war. I was born to my parents were both coming from Poland, Jacob Sluszny and Jenta Helfgott. I had two older brothers, and when the Germans came into Belgium, my father was looking for a place to hide because they realized that the people who were living with the trains from Mechelen, from the Dossin-Kaserne towards Auschwitz, most of them didn't come back. People got letters that they had to go and work, but they never came back. And that's why my parents went in hiding. But we had a very good place, about 20 minutes from Antwerp, and all the family was together. The only one who could go out of the room and play downstairs was me. I was 2.5 years. I was a blonde little girl. And we imagined, my parents and the people where we were hiding, that nobody would realize that I was a Jewish girl. My brothers couldn't go down because they had black hair, and people would recognize them very quickly as Jewish children. When I played downstairs between the two houses where we were hidden and the next house, there was a hole in the wall, and I could go from one house to the other one. In the other house were living Anna and Charles Jacobs van Dijk, the best people I ever met in my life. They had a shop, they were selling food, and they had no children. But Anna had 3 cats. And when she made some warm food for herself and her husband, she would give the same food to her cats because that were her babies. Well, one day, when I saw Anna put the food on the floor, I went through the hole and I went out to take that food because I was hungry. We didn't have enough to eat because you needed stamps and money to get some food. And because we were in hiding, we couldn't get the stamps. So the lady where we lived, she couldn't get enough food to give to us. So we were not satisfied with the food enough. And I went to take that food from the cats. What I didn't know was that Anna was standing behind the curtain and she had seen me. It's from that moment on that she gave food to me for my parents, my brothers, and for me. Now, we thought that we were very safe there, but it wasn't true. Somebody must have realized that some Jewish people were hiding in the house of Poldin, and he went to denounce us with the Germans. Now, the mayor of Hemixem, where we were hidden, he had a son of 12. And before coming to check if we were still there, he sent his son to Charles, the gentleman living next door, with the message, go and tell these people to flee very quickly. I will come through the front door and they can go out by the back door. When Charles came up, he said, Mr. and Mr. Sluszny, take your two sons, take whatever you can take in your hands and go and try to find another hiding place. If you want, leave the little one with us. We will look after her. We have a room for her and we will look after her that she will be safe. Well, imagine that my parents maybe had 1 or 2 minutes to think, will they leave me or not? But they had no other choice. Their hands were full, one with the son, with a bag or a suitcase or whatever they had to take. And I was staying with Anna and Charles. Charles said, if you find a good place, you can come and pick her up. Well, my parents didn't find a good place in the 3.5 years. They had to change about 15 times from hiding place. I didn't see my parents only once, my mom, not my father, not my brothers, only once after I had been very ill. My mother came out, she took the chance. It was very dangerous, but she did come to find out if I was completely cured. Now, Anna and Charles, they gave me love, they gave me food, they gave me my own bedroom, they gave me everything. And I used to go to church with Anna on Sunday morning, but she never asked of me to say a prayer because she realized I was a Jewish kid and I didn't know that I was Jewish. It wasn't said to me because it was too dangerous if I would have known, most probably. And I also went to school. And when the war was finished, we were saved by the Canadians. The last day of school, the teacher said to Anna and Charles, if you think that your daughter wants to go and study later, you should send her to Antwerp, because in Antwerp, the studies are more elaborated than here in a little village. So Charles wrote to my parents to come and pick me up. Why did Charles know how to find my parents? Well, he, through the 3.5 years that I was living with them, he would take the chance, the danger, because it was very dangerous and it wasn't allowed to go out on the street after 10 o'clock. Well, he took a box with food and he would go regularly and find my parents, even they were in 15 different places. So on the end of the war, he knew exactly where to write to them because they had come back to Antwerp. Well, this little girl who was not even 6, when the door opened and this lady came in, and I say lady because I didn't recognize my mother. I hadn't seen her only once, and I couldn't remember that during 3.5 years. Charles said, no, you can go with your mom home. And I thought I was home because I was very, very happy. I was an exception, I think, not the only exception, but there weren't that many who were as lucky as I was to have love, to have food, to have everything. And he said, you can go with your mom. And fortunately for me, my mother asked Charles and Anna, how can we ever do something to say thank you? And both of them said, don't take the little one completely from us. So my mom gave her word that I would come back every weekend. So I left with my mother. I went home, and only then did I realize that I was born from Jewish people. In the week, I was with my own parents. I went to Jewish school. Sorry, in the week. And in the weekend, I could go back to Hemixem, to Anna and Charles. So I had a complete double education. And I'm very lucky that I had that, because I tried to take out the best of all of them, of that 4 people who were so fantastic. I was married in 1960 with another hidden child who wasn't that fortunately, because he lost his grandparents, his parents, his sister, his aunt, and his uncle. So you needed a lot of luck in the war to survive. And I was a lucky one. Belgium has saved a lot of people, 50% of those who were living before the war in Belgium, the Jewish people. And among them, about 5,000 children from a few weeks till 15 years. But not everybody was as lucky as me. I go to the schools, I tell my story, because I don't want the children to think that it was that easy. But I want them to understand that you have to make a choice in life. Whenever it comes, the moment will come that you have to make a choice. And then you have to choose, like Anna and Charles, to do good in life, to help people. Because everybody is capable of helping one another and not look away like a lot of people did during the war. So I was a very lucky little girl, and I still remember Anna and Charles every time I go to the schools, and that's nearly every day in the week, all through Belgium. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Regina. I've heard, can you hear me actually? Yes. So Regine, thank you very much. I've heard your testimony a few times now, and every time it's just as moving, and you always make me cry. So thank you very much. And I will now invite Mr. Barnabas to moderate the panel.
Thank you, Sarah. I would like to start by thanking once again our panelists for joining us for the ceremony. And as for my first question, let me turn to Ms. Katharina von Schnurbein. Last October, the European Commission, under the leadership of Vice President Schinas, unveiled for the first time an EU-wide strategy to combat anti-Semitism. Katharina, you have been a great ally for the Jewish community and were instrumental in developing this historic plan. Could you please explain to our audience the strategy and why it constitutes a step forward in the fight against anti-Semitism?
Thank you, Barnabas. Before, just let me thank also Regina so much. It's also not the first time that I hear your testimony, but it is always so moving and full of strength. And I admire you for going through this pain every time again when you talk about it for the good of our young people. So thank you very much for this. So with regards to this strategy, I believe indeed it is a very important step forward in the commitment of the European Commission and of the European Union to work towards a Europe free from anti-Semitism. We want a Europe where Jewish life can flourish, where Jews can live, as the president said today in the European Parliament, in line with their religious and cultural traditions. They can live the way they choose to live, free from security concerns. We wanted to make sure the words that we have expressed, I think, over the years and the commitment are also met with actions. And so this strategy holds over 70 actions that are to be implemented until 2030 as a together with the member states, together with civil society, with Jewish communities, with all those organizations, sports clubs, universities, parties, all those who want to get involved in addressing anti-Semitism, because we know, that we can do whatever we want on European level unless it trickles down and we see countries, governments, actors on national, local, city level embrace this this strategy and act on a local level. It will not change the situation. And what we want to see is really change for the Jewish community. But as Vice President Schinas said, it is not only a threat to the Jews to see anti-Semitism and also Holocaust distortion and denial rise at such a speed at the moment. It is also a threat to European democracy, and it is, I think, also therefore our common responsibility and our will to ensure that Europe is really the place where we all want and can live. One important aspect that we have always said is that it is not for the Jewish community to address or to fight anti-Semitism. It is really the responsibility of the state, of state actors, of civil society, and of the general public. And one way to reach out to the general public, in particular also in times of pandemic, has been to see a lot of government buildings today lit with "We Remember." Tonight also the Parlement, the headquarters of the European Commission, is lit, the European Parliament, the Brussels Town Hall, and many parliaments and government buildings across Europe. And I believe that that we see an increase of awareness that in the face of the pandemic, where we have seen Holocaust trivialization with people wearing Stars of David, saying unvaccinated, trivializing the experience of the victims that were murdered and those that survived the Holocaust, that it is very important to raise our voices and to ensure Holocaust awareness and Holocaust remembrance becomes a responsibility for the general public. I believe that when we see this kind of trivialization, there are two aspects. One is a lack of moral compass in a way, a lack of understanding, and the other one is also a lack of knowledge and a lack of facts. And here, education is very important. The commissioner has already mentioned different initiatives that we want to do in order to show with regards to Holocaust remembrance and also education, how local the Holocaust happened. Of course, it was initiated by Nazi Germany, by the Germans, but it was a European tragedy, and it happened with the help of many collaborators. And I believe there is something very true also in what Regina said, the question of, you know, what is my responsibility? When I have to take a choice, what is my responsibility? And therefore, we want to reach out also to young people to create ambassadors on the Holocaust, because we know that peer-to-peer education can be very successful and can be very impactful. This is something that the president also reiterated today at the European Parliament and recommitted. There are many other actions in this strategy. I'm not going to go into it, but it reaches from addressing anti-Semitism online, ensuring prosecution of online hatred, increasing victim support, a better data collection of incidents. We want to see security for Jewish community and also support initiatives that highlight Jewish life all across Europe, including through funding and project funding. And I believe that with all these initiatives and all these aspects, we can reach out to the general public. And then we, of course, want to see those also reflected in our external action and lead the fight against anti-Semitism globally. Israel in this is a key partner, and we look forward to closely working with Israel and as to further, let's say, intensify the good work that we have and the good collaboration that we have had over the past years. So much maybe as an introduction.
Thank you, Katharina. Such an important and thorough plan. For the next question, let me turn to Regina. We have a question from our audience to you. As a young German, I would like to ask you what you hope our generation will do and how, in your opinion, we can continue to keep the memory alive and can counter anti-Jewishness in the best way.
Well, first of all, when I go to the schools, I realize that the students, what age they have, if it's from 12 till university, they know very little about what happened. And if they know something, it's not the truth most of the time. So we need more, like Katharina said, educate youngsters who can go and talk to them, because I'm not that young anymore, you know? I don't know how long I can go every day to the schools. I know that Antwerp is doing a lot. The Vredecentrum is going to make 2 films from my story. So at least they can send that to the schools. It's part of the education, but it's the most is the education which is necessary for all of them, because the teachers don't know, they don't give any lessons. They have to teach about the Shoah, but they don't know anything or hardly anything. And I don't know how that comes, but are they not interested? There's only a few who speak, who go to Auschwitz or they go to Dossin-Kaserne in Mechelen, but it's not enough. And they have not enough luggage to defend themselves. The few who want to defend the Jewish people, they don't have enough luggage.
Thank you, Regina. The next question, back to you, Katharina. One of the issues identified by the strategy is Israel-related anti-Semitism. 14 years ago, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, or IRA, the working definition of anti-Semitism was published to reflect what European Jews view as anti-Semitic. How would you assess the impact of the IRA definition over the past few years? Do you see an evolution, a shift in public policies and in the public debate as more countries, sports clubs, and universities are adopting the text?
I believe that over the past years, the IRA definition has really become the expression of organization, of states, of entities to say we want to stand up against all forms of anti-Semitism, and we take an approach that is based on what the majority of Jews themselves regard as anti-Semitic. And it is a non-legally binding definition. So this, I believe, helps to ensure that it is not infringing on freedom of speech. It's a very useful tool to recognize anti-Semitic bias and then act upon it. And we see that countries that have adopted it and actually use it, for example, in training of police, it gradually changes something, because what we would hope, of course, is then that there's also an increase of reporting, that victims actually do go to the police, because they have the feeling that when they go, their anti-Semitic incident is actually recognized as such. Yeah? But we do see that training helps enormously, and those countries who explicitly train, for example, also teachers, and not only the history teachers, but every teacher needs to recognize an anti-Semitic remark, in particular also when it comes to Israel-related anti-Semitism in the courtyard of the school, and they need to have an answer when there is Holocaust trivialization, in the sense of what Israelis are doing to Palestinians is like the Nazis did to the Jews. They need to be equipped to do so. And so the IRA definition is a very useful tool in this kind of training. We have, together with the IRA, issued in January last year a handbook to help people, institutions use the IRA definition, and based on concrete examples and concrete best practices that are actually being applied by member states, hope that this will support also civil society and governments to use it in an effective way.
Thank you, Katharina. I think this is all the time that we had for today. And I want to wrap up by saying an enormous thank you to both of you for joining us today, and to your work that you have devoted your lives to, which have an incredible impact. I'm sure our audience deeply appreciates your participation. Sarah, I give you the floor.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you for this important panel. Indeed, Holocaust education within the young generation is essential to keep Holocaust memory alive. Now, before we finish, I would now like to invite the two participants of our panel to each light a memorial candle as well. Mrs. Suchowolski-Sluszny will light a candle in memory of Sally Hernik. Sally was born in Zvinitsky, Romania in 1922 to Moshe and Froma. She was a tailor and she was single. She was murdered in Transnistria in 1943 at the age of 21. And Mrs. von Schnurbein will light a candle for Shmuel Began. He was born to Mordechai and Rose in Gliniani, Poland in 1904. Shmuel was a merchant. He was murdered in the extermination camp of Belgian in Poland in 1943 at the age of 39. Thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, if you also wish to take part in the Shem Vener project and light a candle in the memory of one victim of the Holocaust, you can visit the R6 Million website. You will find all the information there. We will share in the chat of this Zoom the link to this website, so you will find all the information. Now, I would like to thank you all for having been with us to mark the International Holocaust Remembrance Day. I would like to thank all our distinguished speakers, and a very special thanks to Ms. Suchowolski-Sluszny for having shared her personal story with us. So thank you all very much again.